Hello, and welcome to Two Pews in a Pod. Join us as we explore faith in a modern world at Evangelical Lutheran Church in Frederick, Maryland. Now, here is your host, Pastor Paul Baglios.
I'm Paul Baglios, happy to welcome you again to this episode of Two Pews in a Pod, the podcast of Evangelical Lutheran Church here in Frederick. And this is the third of three episodes in a series about life after and surviving the death of a spouse. I am joined again by members of the congregation who have taken part in previous episodes.
I'm Dee Dee Bowman.
Jimmy Capino.
Sandy Brown.
And in this episode, one of the things that we want to talk about, which we've touched upon in the previous two episodes in some ways, but I want to make it more explicit, regarding the death of your spouses. What helped you? What gave you the strength? What aided you in moving forward with that grief that, as you said in our first episode, Dee Dee, you always carry? But what has given you the strength to go forward carrying it?
Physical strength. One of the first things that ever happened, somebody from the church came into my home and handed me a little basket of 4 muffins. Said nothing much, stayed for a few minutes and then left. I've never forgotten that. It was the connection, the coming to see me, not knowing how I was going to be, but just caring enough to make a gesture.
Recognizing that.
Yes.
I had, I was completely devastated, for 2 or 3 months. I didn't want to crawl out of the ball I was rolled up in. And, but my church family really helped me a lot. The people of the praise team and I just had, this warmth of question, when people would see me, how you doing, and I knew that, I would be okay. Tim Fast, one day I was away, and I came home, and Tim and his wife were in my yard mowing grass for me.
Oh, my.
Just out of nowhere. I didn't ask them to do it, but that was one of the kindest things that's ever happened to me. I'll never forget that. It was beautiful.
I think the kindness of those in your circle and those that you didn't realize were part of your circle. When Mark died, it was so touching. Again, just that acknowledgement that I see you was so uplifting. I, too, did a few things that were helpful for me. I appreciate the life of a hermit. I can see myself very easily enjoying that life, knowing that it probably, especially after Mark died, was not the most healthy way to be. So that I intentionally did the things that Mark and I did together that I wanted to continue to do after his death, because I knew if I waited, it would just be harder and I wouldn't do it. Coming to worship on a Sunday morning, being probably the top of that list. The fact that it was Holy Week and there were lots of opportunities didn't hurt either. But for me, doing those things that I thought would be hard, and they were hard, but doing them almost immediately rather than kind of what I felt like I wanted to do, which may have been just hold up.
I was just curled up in a ball.
Right.
Yeah.
For me was, I think, really helpful in continuing that journey, or continuing my journey.
If you're willing, I'd like to linger there with you for a moment, because I know that for many people, if they are by habit churchgoers and they are married, that is usually one of the things they do with their spouse. Not always, but it often is. Maybe I should say often instead of usually. and that if a spouse dies, that can be one of the hardest things to do. And I appreciate you saying that it was hard. I'm curious to know, how is it now? Has that changed at all?
Just like grief as a whole, it's not as raw.
Okay.
It doesn't slap like it once did, or isn't sharp. Now and again, oh yeah. But that is not the overwhelming feeling. I love the fall festivals in the church. Reformation, All Saints, we're coming up to Christ the King and Advent. Yet those are also ones that I miss Mark.
Well, and both for you and for you, Sandy, I knew John and I knew Mark, and I knew them here in worship at Evangelical Lutheran Church with you. And now, as we think about Barb Meckler in worship without Leo, I think of Andrea Shepherd coming. And I know how hard that can be. How has that been for you? Was it hard?
Well, because I physically wasn't, except in the summer, sitting next to John in church.
That's right.
I was up in the choir loft looking down on that little gray head and thinking,
Yep.
that's mine.
That little gray head is mine.
It was a wonderful feeling. And
God thinks the same thing, by the way.
So now when I'm there, I miss seeing him. But because I'm physically in a different location, it might have been a little easier for me.
And I did not know Elizabeth.
Well, Elizabeth was on the praise team as well. She started on the choir when she first got started. And that's how I got involved in this. Is she moved to the contemporary music and said, you got to come check this out. And so I did, and that's how I got involved here in the church. But yeah, it was every week, and music planning and stuff like that. Everything was with the two of us.
Yeah.
And when she was gone, I was,
Yeah.
it was tough.
Her voice was missed.
Yes. And I still have recordings of her voice, So there's a song we're going to do in the Christmas week, so the weeks before Christmas, I guess, called "So Far So High" that she and I both wrote, and we recorded it, and I have a very nice recording of her, and just to hear her voice, because she was able to sing all the harmony parts as well as the lead lines, and so I put that on once in a while and go, wow, that was cool. That was
I want
really
to say I envy you for that, because although I had a lot of phone messages from John, and I would periodically erase them, I don't have any left.
Oh.
And that's sad for me, because I would like to hear his voice again.
Yeah, I did another album at one point where I was doing just old country folk songs, and brought Elizabeth in to the studio to sing the harmony parts on that. So I can, on those,
that's great.
you go, that was a good harmony part she did. She was very talented.
I never would have thought of that, Sandy. Hearing a recording. Jimmy can hear Elizabeth singing. It just now struck me. I don't have any recordings of Sharon, nor she of me. The music that I do, the music that is on SoundCloud, is all instrumental.
But there's recordings of your sermonizing.
Yeah, your sermons are on.
That's
Things
true. I
could be
wasn't
found.
thinking of that. Yeah, I wasn't thinking of that. A dear friend couple of ours, the husband died. I think I may have spoken about this a little bit when we were doing our first episode. And for a long time, well beyond a year, his wife left his voice on the answering message. And the experience of calling that number and hearing him.
That would be hard for me.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have moved that way or
Yeah.
made that choice for me.
I find it comforting now, though.
Yeah.
You know, at first it was like, geez, I can't listen to this, you know?
Yeah.
And then, but now at this point, you know, I'll hear it and I go, oh, that was really nice.
That season was a good one.
Yeah.
What other physical mementos or artifacts, material mementos or artifacts are meaningful for you?
I'm now reading little scriptural things and prayers that John had. And when I turned the page last night, it said John Brown. That's probably where he identified the ownership of these books. And just to hold it, knowing that he held it.
Yeah.
Elizabeth was a writer, a very good writer. And so every once in a while I'll go onto the Frederick News Post and look at some of the articles that she wrote and read those. My mom, when she passed away, she was an artist as well. And so I have her paintings hanging throughout my house. I never let go of anybody. You know, I got pictures and, you know, of all these people that, you know, when you've got that many aunts and uncles, you know. I actually found a bunch of old 8mm home movies.
Oh, my.
That were taken during when I was a child. And so it's got all my aunts and uncles in it and all that stuff. So
Put it on a DVD.
I did.
Yeah.
I am not a keeper of things. In our relationship, Mark was the keeper of things and I was the thrower-outer of things.
I need one of those.
Okay, I'll come over next week and we'll start throwing out. So I don't know that I have items that bring back those same kind of emotions.
But you got it here.
I got it there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am frequently reminded of his legacy at the Earth and Space Science Lab, and hold that near and dear.
I remember at his service how that legacy was addressed in remembrances and testimonies to his life and its impact.
It isn't tangible, but what I think is comforting for me is people aren't afraid to talk about John. Tell me funny things. So I think keeping that alive, just because something will remind them, oh, John did this or he said that or whatever, that's really nice for me. And his family has stayed connected with me, though we were relatively in short communication throughout the period of time that I knew John. They're very supportive of me, and that makes me feel good.
And I think because you are open to that.
Yeah.
And you have modeled that, even maybe not necessarily being aware, but that, there's that certain vulnerability that I think is important when we want to hear those things. And
Which
maybe not
reminded me,
everybody does.
I think somewhere I've got a cassette of John's, one of his sermons. I'm going to have to look through and see if I can find it. Then I'll hear
Well,
it.
thanks to you, I have 2 of his clergy shirts. So I'll tell the story. I'm of the opinion, no one has to agree, but I only wear black clergy shirts. John being more colorful and more Presbyterian. So Sandy gifted me with a robin's egg blue
Nice.
clergy shirt
And
and a red one.
Well, it's
And
burgundy.
in gratitude to Sandy and in my own love for John, this year at Pentecost, and I'll do this each year, I wore that red clergy shirt.
And during his funeral, you wore it. And you wore his cross,
Yep.
which you said he wasn't supposed to have.
And it's right there.
Oh, okay.
That's it.
Oh, wonderful.
I don't normally wear a cross when I'm vested because that's usually something that would distinguish a bishop among other clergy. Presbyterians don't have bishops, so John wore crosses. But for his service, I used that.
Well, that was very much appreciated.
And the point that you make is so important. So for those listening, for those viewing, as you are relating to people who are in grief, whether it's a spouse or another family relationship or a friend, the importance of continuing to name the name and recall the memories. Some years ago, a woman very close to me, her eldest son died. He and I were both young men, not quite 20, not quite 21. And as time went on, I remember her saying that the hardest thing, no one talked about him. Her husband did, and their other sons did, but outside the household family, nobody talked about him. And I would anticipate that people thought it's too painful. I don't want to bring it up. I don't want to name the name.
Or don't know what to say.
Or don't know what to say. But I think one of the best things, and perhaps one of the easiest, just share memories. You know, I remember the time that John, blah, blah, blah. You know, I remember things about Mark. Mark and John were both participants in the Thursday Bible study that we do here each week, meeting via Zoom. And I can still think of questions John would ask, mostly about you helping him work the Zoom technology, but questions that Mark would ask about something we were discussing. And just to share with the person in grief memories that you cherish of the person who has died. It's easier, I think, than asking questions. As I've said, I know it can be comforting. I'm always a little leery of, oh, how are you question, for concern that it makes people feel like, well, now I need to give the answer expected.
It reminds me of the 6 men and the elephant.
This will be good. Go ahead.
Well, each person at the elephant, blinded.
Oh, I thought you were going to do something else. Go ahead, Sandy.
No, but to hear other people talk about, say, John,
show.
They come from a different perspective. Yeah. And it's nice to know these different facets. Meeting people as an adult, I enjoy reading obituaries to find out what it is about this person I didn't know before. And so I think that's also very interesting.
Mm-hmm. So the last thing I was thinking we would talk about in this series is to think about your experience of grief and your faith as a Christian. How have those two things impacted one another?
Well, I think about it more. I'm doing more investigating of the scriptures and biblical writings and things like that I never bothered to do. And as I think I said before, I apologize to John in ether that I didn't do that when he could appreciate the fact that he guided me in this direction.
I think the way I practice my faith is now mine. And for 43 years, even before we were married, that was ours. So it's a little bit different ownership. Because we did share an active faith life, as I said, from even before we were married. So again, it's been a journey of learning that I'm taking sole ownership of that for me, rather than it being a communal, if you will, activity for us.
I don't know that I've ever heard that comment before. That's fascinating. Jimmy, any response that you'd want to offer?
I know that from we were given the news that she had cancer on Christmas Eve, and from that point on, my faith has been challenged severely. I've lost a lot of people in my life, but within a year, my mother had passed away, and then Elizabeth's mother passed away within a year, and I've been fighting with that constantly since the day she got that. It's just a question of why.
Yeah.
Why? Why does this have to be? As Mary said, if Jesus had been there 3 or 4 days ago, he wouldn't have died.
Yeah.
Well, he could have fixed it for everybody, couldn't he?
Yeah.
So I always wonder why he doesn't.
Well, the reason that eternity is eternal is because God has a lot of questions to answer.
When I get there, I've got lots of things I'm planning on asking.
It's going to take a while.
Look at the old George Burns movies, Oh God movies, and he has some good answers in there.
Well, again, thank you so much for your willingness to share this. I know despite some of the laughter we've enjoyed in these conversations, this is not a light topic. And your willingness to share some of your experience and some of your perspective, I hope will prove helpful to others who have listened or viewed the episodes of this series. As I said at the beginning, this is the third and the last episode in this particular series. Thank you for helping us to shape this for the people of ELC and for the friends of ELC. I'm Paul Baglios.
I'm Dee Dee Bowman.
Jimmy Capino.
Sandy Brown, and if you want to talk to me or call me, I'm happy to speak.
This has been Two Pews in a Pod, a podcast hosted by the pastor of Evangelical Lutheran Church in Frederick, Maryland. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.